Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as CEDH. I'm your host, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I am joined by my co-hosts, Reed, aka Sick Robot.
How you doing?
And Morgan, aka Spleenface.
What's up, everyone?
And in this episode, we'll be covering board control in CEDH, and kind of a timely topic, unfortunately, I suppose. And we'll be getting into that towards the end of the show. But to not bury the lead, Orcish Bowmasters is a card that is coming out in the new Lord of the Rings set. And it is something that is going to be format warping. So we're going to, just give a little bit of a primer and background on board control in the format and why it's good and why it's scary and why Bowmasters is going to be good when you start seeing it in games. But yeah, it's not a whole Bowmasters episode. We're going to save that mostly for the end. And it's going to be mostly non-Bowmasters cards. So just kind of talking about what's been around in the format for a while in terms of board control. But yeah, before we get into that, what have you guys been up to since the last episode?
Well, I mean, this is we'll just cannibalize new developments for this. So Morgan played a 2-headed giant commander tournament, which is a fun one, relatively recently.
When will they learn to stop running 2-headed giant and start running 2v2?
Dude, Reed even had turn spells in his deck and literally never
yeah,
oh wow.
It was actually hilarious that so we ended up playing Thrast Vial and Kess. Morgan was playing Thrast Vial with a polymorph strat, so
nice.
Tidespout Tyrant, and then just like a bunch of good value stuff, because turns out the Grixis core is pretty good when you get to play like Thoughtseize and Mind Twist and stuff. And then Kess also does the same thing, except I was also playing polymorphs, but I wasn't a polymorph deck, which is fun. Because,
nice.
Giant, you take the same turn, so I just like have a bunch of polymorphs that I could also point at Morgan, and then Kess can
Were you running
back if required.
Oath of Druids?
Morgan was, yeah.
I was,
okay,
yeah.
Nice.
I'm actually sure that we should have been running it, to be completely honest, but we were.
How does Oath work in 2-headed giant? Is it like it counts your collective opponent's team?
It counts each person. It counts each person separately.
Okay.
Yeah. Which makes it a bit awkward. Makes it sort of weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, so did pretty well. We went undefeated. Took it all down.
Yeah.
It was a good time. I got to Mind Twist somebody for 4 on turn 2. That was a good one. We got a couple of games where we just sort of picked opponents apart for like 5 turns straight, and then just did the okay, I guess we'll win now after they were completely empty. Always fun.
Hell yeah. I mean, honestly, if you had taken any losses, it would have been a massive L considering it's 2-headed giant. Yeah.
Massive
once you know the whole
record.
shtick of 2-headed giant,
yeah.
like it's like tic-tac-toe, man. If you lose in tic-tac-toe, you've
the thing is, we didn't even
gone horribly wrong.
We didn't even abuse 2-headed giant. Like, these are decks that we could have just played in in 2v2.
Yeah.
Instead.
Well, I mean, I would have had to cut Nas. But...
Yeah, like you would have cut the Nas out of your deck specifically. I don't even think I was on Nas in my deck.
You weren't.
No.
Yeah.
So like we minor alterations of the decks basically would have been the exact same. So we weren't even doing like the full abuse. I guess I wouldn't have had turns in my deck, but still.
But it doesn't matter because you literally
just
draw them,
never drew them, so it did not matter anyway. Yeah, it was a fun one. Our last game was actually probably the most interesting, most interactive. We had to go for a pretty sketchy breach line through an active heuristic study. Drew the Yuriko player like 7 cards in the process, and they were like a very interactive deck, so bit sketchy, but managed to get there. Won the same turn as well off of Morgan casting Frantic Search a couple of times out of the bin to untap my lands, and then brain freezing me out so that I could cast and flashback or reanimate for my Thoracle.
Oh yeah, Morgan was
because Morgan's on polymorph, so he does not have a Thassa's Oracle in his deck.
Nice. That's
so had to find that one. We actually pulled that one a couple of times, I think, technically.
Yep.
That's sick.
Yep.
That's sick. Any super notable decks from your opponents, or was it kind of just different? Different
Unfortunately,
level?
so we went because we had some local peeps who put us onto the tournament, but we didn't realize that it was a free tournament going into it. And we weren't pub stomping. Like, there were good decks there, but there were also like some teams that like just showed up with 2 commander decks and like didn't know each other before showing up. Just sort of showed up, and then we're like, "Hey, you want a team for this?" And they was like, "Yeah, sure."
Interesting that you said it's
So,
not pub stomping, and literally just to go went on to describe how it's literally pub stomping. But
I mean,
whatever.
so like more than half the field was like CDH decks, right?
Okay, that's good. That's good.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, something
pretty
like
much.
that.
I think it was pretty much exactly half.
Yeah. So if we were pub stomping, we weren't the only perpetrators, which is basically all you can say.
Did you go to the organizers afterwards and been like, listen, so this 2-headed giant thing, that's great and fun and all, but let me show you, spread the good word.
Should have, or at least we should like fire an email off.
Yeah, man. I want if 2v2 could get started again, I'd freaking nut. That's awesome. I want it back again. But yeah, that's cool. For myself, not a whole lot. I guess shout out to local friends and friends of the show, Tim and Evan. They recently moved very close to where I am, and so we've been going to my LGS, and it's been kind of rad. Looking forward to building the CDH community locally here. So very early stages still, but looking forward to that, and getting a bunch of new players in the format and bring people up to speed who already dipped their toes in the format, but maybe not be like they aren't fully entrenched yet. So
yeah, 100%.
Lots of excitement there. Getting
building
to play not just CDH. I mean, I like CDH over webcam. It's fun. I like playing with friends, but paper and with a couple of beers and everything. That's also I just love that. Nothing beats that.
Yeah.
Cool. So we don't really have any new patrons, so nothing for housekeeping. And Reed, as you mentioned, cannibalized new developments with the 2-headed giant thing. So I guess we can just take this moment to shout out all of our existing patrons. You guys are awesome, and to everyone who's all of our the potential future. It's no new patrons. I feel like it's like the Patrick meme. He's got his face is covered in chocolate. He's like, now I'm gonna starve. No new patrons. What the heck? No. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys, for continued support. And really, it's not the new patrons we really much appreciate, but it's the continued support that really keeps things going and allows us to pay our editor and afford to hopefully bring back gameplay episodes soon. Fingers crossed. But yeah, let's move into the main topic, which is board control in CDH. So, it's kind of a broad but also narrow topic. Because board control in CDH is pretty niche. Which is kind of surprising given how powerful creatures are in the format and how we just keep getting more and more powerful creatures, right? We're getting Douthie, Opposition Agent, Ranger Captain of Vio, like all of these cards that are
we're
just getting
new stuff that you want to have sit and play for a bit.
Yes. And you don't really see that. I guess there is some movement towards board control, and decks are slotting back in things like Fire Covenant, or since the printing of DBF, some decks are on that Delayed Blast Fireball, and it's nice to see that move in direction, but not many decks focusing on board control as a strategy. And so we're going to talk a bit about that. So do you guys want to give any comments on the kind of broad subject of board control before we start talking about specific decks?
Yeah, I got one. Board control, more like board control, BORED.
Boo!
That's my
Boo! Morgan?
I mean, I guess we can go through these decks and then sort of talk about board control more broadly. But like if that's how we want to approach it.
Sure.
Yeah,
So initially this category was called Best Board Control Decks in CDH, and then it turns out it's basically just an exhaustive list.
Yeah, turns out board control is a primary strategy, not that great.
No, I disagree.
Listen,
So this is okay. I also think, we're going to get into this because we're going to talk about how great Bowmaster is. I just
Yeah.
don't think you can say that and at the same time think Bowmaster is insane.
I certainly can, because Bowmaster isn't a primary strategy comprising like a 15 or 20 card package. It's a single card.
You don't,
Like,
but you don't need a 15, 20 card package for it to be a primary strategy.
sure, you just need to dedicate like a command zone slot to it, which like makes it also like iffy, right? I don't know.
I disagree.
I don't know that that's true.
Yeah, I think board control is with all the strong
I
creatures
don't
and
think
things,
you
it's
need to-
quite good.
Dedicate a command zone slot, but I also don't necessarily agree that like I do definitely see the argument that slotting Bowmaster gives you a lot of board control without making your deck like
No, yeah.
strategic.
Yeah,
100% I agree with
Like,
that. I
it's
agree
not
with
a
that, yeah.
primary strategy.
But
It's
what
just
I'm saying is
busted.
you can't be like board control is not good, and then Bowmaster is good, because Bowmaster's primary advantage is its
But-
board control.
But I
engine.
didn't say board control isn't good. I said board control as a primary strategy for a deck isn't good. Very different, right?
But I don't think. Okay. I guess we could get into what does it mean to be a primary strategy for board control. But we'll touch on that after we cover the board control, the exhaustive list of board control decks in CDH. Okay, so I guess there's two real types of board control. I guess you could maybe like 2.5 types of board control. There's board control in the command zone, where you've got a reliable piece of or just a reliable engine through your commander that exerts board control in some way. So there's two decent ones, and then there's a third one, which is Marath. I guess Halana is also reasonable.
Yeah, Halana is like probably
Very
the best
reasonable.
of the bunch in terms of like viability, I'd say, on a broad scale.
No, I think Tago's better than Halana, but
Halana has Timna associated with her, which makes it
and
like,
Tago is Thrasios,
insane.
and,
Yeah, we all know Timna's the
but
Timna's the top
Timna
of that
Halana doesn't
relationship.
have blue
I mean,
or
you could
red,
play Timna
so...
Tago.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I guess you could. I guess okay. I mean, people do play. Okay, we're rambling. Let's just list the decks, then we can start talking about them. So in the commander-centric ones, we've got Thrasios Tago. We've got Jeska X. There's quite a few Jeska decks. There's like Jeska Timna, Jeska Ishai, and I mean, there's more of them. We've got Timna Halana as another engine, and then we've got Marath. Out of these, I would say Timna, Halana, and Thrasios Tago stand above the rest. I think.
Yeah, I think it depends on like if you're talking about generic, like just overall power level, or like how well they do board control plus power level. Because like Timna Halana, I think is like higher on just like raw power level, just because like the win cons are really good. You have like a really good primary strategy, and Halana's sort of a free roll on top of a like already very strong shell. Whereas like Thrasios Tago is like just like the better like dedicated board control.
You get
niche.
better. So the advantage is Tago is a better board control engine than Halana.
Yeah.
The ability to not have to commit your mana resources, like not having to play a spell and then get that trigger to then do something, and being able to do that at instant speed and like bank the things, and you get synergies with your artifacts. Like that is the advantage of Tago over Halana. But then Timna is pretty much stronger than Thrasios as a value engine, and Timna, Halana, Abzan, you've got good stuff going on there. I do think that
I mean,
the blue and
Hulk
red
is just like hyper compact at this point.
I
as
don't even
well.
because obviously there is the Timna Halana Hulk. I personally like the Timna Halana Razaketh, although now that with the new Samwise pile,
I mean, Samwise just it's just.
I think it's
so
more of a
compact.
conversation. I
It's
still
so
like
compact.
Razaketh, but that's not really a board control discussion per se. But yeah, I think the reasons why Togo, we were talking about Togo versus Halana, are kind of why Togo, I think, outclasses Jeska. I don't think Thrash Jeska is something I'd want to be on. But like, if
Well,
you're doing
that like also depends, right? Because like Jessica is a lot better as like tempo board control, whereas like Taco is just like if you're like
trying to
Taco's like
control,
if you're
yes.
always going to take the game to like turn a bajillion, Taco's usually going to be better. But like if you just need to get 1 or 2 good board wipes in over the course of a game, and like one needs to happen on turn 2 or turn 3, and then one needs to happen on like turn like 5 to 7 or whatever, Jessica's probably better.
Yes, if you want to, sorry, go aahead.
We also definitely forgot Armix.
Oh, Armix. There we go. Yeah, that's a good one too. I like.
I was looking at this list, like I feel like we're forgetting.
No, I went through the database,
like,
but yeah, no
more.
true.
I mean, like Toxrill is also a pretty huge one, even if it is fat in the command zone.
We'll see.
I mean, blue black. I don't know. Then there are like a couple of other ones. I mean, like. We can talk about like the other category afterward, but yeah.
Okay, so so I guess that's the category of like the engine in the command zone, the board control engine in the command zone, and then we've got decks that have the ability to run a lot of good board wipes or board control cards, due to some because there's like Fire Covenant, Delayed Blast Fireball can be run in any deck.
Deluge,
and Deluge can't necessarily, right? Like if you're very dork heavy, you probably don't want to be on Deluge.
I'd say like Deluge is still pretty wide reaching in terms of its applicability, though. Like there are a lot of decks that are on like 15-ish creatures that are still like more than happy to just jam a.
Certainly, but I would think Deluge still falls into the category of Pyroclasms, right? Where you're running it because you break parity on through either you're having high toughness creatures in play or you're not committing a ton of stuff to the board that lets you do that. Whereas like the Fire Covenant and Delayed Blast Fireball are purely asymmetrical. But yeah, the decks that would fall into this category, I listed a lot of decks. Like I listed Riel.
Just Riel, everything that you play.
I very much love board control based decks. So Riel. Magar is one I've been messing around with recently that plays a lot of single target removal, but then also gets to play Pyroclasms because everything has 3 toughness. Godo gets to run a lot of board control cards because it's not playing to the board super heavily. And these are like Pyroclasm style decks. Yeah. And then you've got something like Shorikai, which can, because you're playing a polymorph strat and your commander is not a creature, you can just run like full-fledged Wraths. You can run like Vanquish the Horde, Supreme Verdict, things along those lines.
Also, like similar thing in this category is like blue Tevesh decks, like 3-color Tevesh decks are also like sort of in this category. You see like Ishai Tevesh being on like Humility, and you can also just be on straight board wipes in that deck a lot of the time, where you just like sort of stick your dude and then draw some cards while nobody can contest it.
Yeah, so to talk about what Reed was talking about earlier, the idea of running like 15 board control cards or whatever, I think obviously you're being a bit hyperbolic, but that is kind of the fundamental difference between these two types of decks, where in order to achieve consistency in having board control in your deck, right? Like you can't be a control deck in CDH if you're only running like, 1 or 2 counter spells in your main deck and you don't have like some kind of control element in the command zone. You need a certain density to see them reliably. And you're either having that density or you're seeing it reliably through the command zone. So the advantage of having the board control engine in the command zone is you can free up more space in your deck. And then if you are going to be putting that into your deck, you don't want to necessarily overload on them, but you can kind of achieve density through accessibility. Or if it's something like a Pyroclasm where you want to like resolve it early, and you don't want to have to like spend a turn tutoring for it and then finding it, like then you might run Pyroclasm, Whip Flare, and I don't know. There's like another one, isn't there?
Things. I mean, depends. Like this is also where we get into like meta dependencies, because you can also just like end up being on whatever, like End of Festivities and the other one that I'm forgetting the name of.
There's a couple of the 1 mana ones,
yeah,
or the 1 damage ones.
So it all really depends on just like what toughness you're targeting, because like a lot of the stuff outside of like if you're not a full board wipe deck, and instead you're trying to be like a Classum deck or whatever, or just like damage wipes, this could like very, very heavily depend on like, again, what toughness numbers you're targeting. Because like if you're targeting 3s, it changes deck building a lot. You're sort of looking at like the 3 mana wipes instead. So, what is it? Sweltering Suns, and then I don't
Radiant Flames.
yeah, Radiant Flames. I don't think Anger of the Gods is probably there, but like it might be.
Anger of the Gods is it's not unreasonable.
I think it's like sort of secondary. I think there's another 3 damage wipe that I'm thinking that I can't remember, that was like printed relatively recently. But
Brotherhood's End.
Yeah.
Brotherhood's End's really sweet.
Yeah.
Although there's not many decks that can run the 3 damage wipes.
Yeah,
I think the main one would be Godo. And Godo probably doesn't want to be on Brotherhood's End because you run a lot of artifacts yourself. It's possible, though, you might still run it just because you can sandbag some artifacts or something, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's probably like it's... I'd say it's probably more relevant than Anchor a lot of the time, but yeah, whatever. That's not
exiling
really
things...
discussion for the...
Not
get hyper sidetracked.
Insanely relevant unless you're able to cast them off of Douthie. Okay, and then Morgan, do you wanna talk about Marath?
No, I told you to take it off this list.
It technically has board control as an ability in the command zone. So,
I mean, I guess. I mean,
it does. Obviously, you can kill like a very limited number of things. You can also like make a board to utilize other effects more powerfully. Like if you have something like an Earthcraft, you can just keep fueling Marath into making more 1/1s, and then you can use that to make an actually big Marath that can actually deal with problematic permanents, or problematic creatures, or like make a bunch of attackers to synergize with like an Oran Frostfang. Obviously, Marath with an Oran Frostfang is also an excellent board control piece.
Yes.
But it just doesn't like. It's 6 mana to deal 3 damage, and then 5 mana to have the privilege of paying more mana to do anything else. Yeah. And it's just really kind of rough.
It's a bit much. I'd say maybe like the New Age Marath equivalent at this point is eventually actually just like Ardenn decks. Ardenn decks tend to be like pretty board control-y for the most part. Obviously Clamp, Shenanigans, and GT are both like very good in that role, and equipment in general tend to be board control-y if they're not in the like card advantage primary space. So yeah, also a fair bit going on in those decks. I guess actually like I'm just backfilling a couple as I'm like thinking of them. Brea, pretty nice as a board control deck in general, but it's not like primary strategy board control.
Yeah, because you have to. There's not a lot of built-in like ways to just you're not your plan isn't to like generate a bunch of artifacts to sack to control the board.
Yeah, your primary
you just have the tool at your disposal.
Your primary strategy is also not casting Brea almost ever.
Yes,
because holy shit, that is not an easy task. Like those decks tend to want to play a lot of rituals and things that make a lot of mana, and those things tend to not make a lot of different colors of mana all at once. So yeah. I guess the other one is...
Wait, but how could we leave Child of Alara
off? My god, true.
I'd say
true.
Probably the other one that's like actually relevant to discussion is I'd say Tasigur, weirdly enough.
Tasigur has access to Toxrill, and
they also tend to be like relatively board control-y in general, just because they want to be able to, like, if you're not playing Turbo Tasigur, which is like a pretty narrow niche. I'm not convinced that like I'm not convinced that Turbo Tasker even ever really justifies itself over like other options once you get up to like the 3-color plus range for that kind of stuff. But yeah, like Tasker decks tend to be pretty slow, and like a lot of the time you're like the dorks aren't really that necessary because they're
not necessary and you don't run many of them.
Yeah, and you're sort of like playing like spell based stuff a lot of the time, and also like if you're doing like damage based or like -X stuff, Tasker has a huge butt, so like
exactly
it's honestly not that big of a deal to be playing Languish or even just straight up Damnation in that deck a lot of the time. So
and we'll get into some cards later on that or a card later on that I want to talk about in context of Tasker as well. But so we've listed all of these board control decks in CDH. let's talk about why board control is good, and then Reed can talk about why he thinks it's shit. So, um, generally, I'd say board control is good because creatures are good. As I was mentioning earlier, like we just keep getting more and more creatures that have insane impact on the game, and I mean, we're going to be getting one that is a board control engine that is game warping, but a lot of these cards, they come into play like, and they change the dynamic of the game, right? Like an opposition agent, like you're playing a subset of the game where all of your tutors are offline and you need to play, in more top deck mode or just draw cards mode. Douthie comes into play and you can't be doing any graveyard shenanigans. Like all of these things it creates like a weird sub kind of meta game. Or Oof comes in like as a stacks piece, and all of these things they warp the game and they're there to stay, because frankly there's more things that you need to answer between your three opponents than single target removal can really address. That's why decks run things like Psych Rift or Dress Down, so that you can get these massive so you can get these massive things and answer multiple permanents at once, because they're all very impactful. How do you decide between removing an Oof that's crippling you and Rule of Law creature that's also an Archon of Emiria that's also crippling you? Like, it can be devastating.
That is sort of the controller's creed, or like the control player's creed in CDH is just like outside of even the context of just board control, is just like looking for things that consistently generate 2-for-1s or 3-for-1s. Usually like 3-for-1s are better is what you're looking for a lot of the time, because you're trying to trade like 1 to 2 cards with each of your opponents all at once for one effect. So
and so, creatures are good. We need to answer them. That's kind of what it boils down to. Another thing is that creatures tend to be really difficult to interact with on the stack. So you need some kind of way to either the single target removal can only take you so far, but these more mass wipes or board control engines, this is where they really shine. Because you just like Grand Abolisher is a great example, right? And this is a card where you kind of have to interact with it on the stack, and you can't really use your board control cards because it hits play and it shuts everything off. So if you've ever really built a deck and considered, man, Abolisher is like, or like this tends to come up with control and mid-range decks more, where you're like, I'm trying to establish control of the game, and I can have a handful of interaction and good removal on board. Like let's say I'm playing Thrastago, I've got a ton of rocks, grip full of counter spells. Someone plays an Abolisher, and I'm like, wow, I can't answer this. It's hard. You've got Force of Will. You've got Mindbreak Trap, but Mindbreak Trap is generally a terrible answer for Abolisher, because Abolisher tends to be the first spell someone plays in a turn, or the second spell. And then
Pact, Mana Drain.
And like not every deck is on Pact, not every deck is on Drain.
Hilarious, because you're probably more likely to be on Spell Snare than either of those.
Well, so I'm on Spell Snare because of I want more answers to Abolisher. Also, I do care about a lot of other 2-drops. 2-drops are quite good in the format. There's also, again, not to talk about Bowmaster too much, but that's a pretty impactful 2-drop that's about to come into the game, so I'd like to be able to answer that. But yeah, they're hard to interact with on the stack, so the ability to interact with them and not just rely overly on all of your counterspell suite, but include removal for these creatures is important. That's part of what makes board control good. And Morgan, you want to talk about this last one and you put on here?
Yeah, so I think one of the other sort of important things that board control gives you is, and this is probably something we could dedicate an entire episode to, just the ability to put pressure on people. Often that will come down to like life totals, or potentially with sort of card advantage, or something like Bowmasters, where people realize they're just going to be falling farther and farther behind. Another one like this is like Drana and Linvala, where if you can sort of threaten to push people out of the game unless they act, then you can force them to act. And since with like in long games of CDH, there tend to be a lot more answers than like game-winning cards. That often means that just sort of going for it without shaping a window for yourself is very unlikely to succeed. So, if you can start beating somebody up and then they realize like, oh, I'm going to be dead in a turn or two if I don't do something about this, then they, do something impactful, other players spend interaction, and then that can be a really powerful tool for creating a window to try and win on an otherwise extremely hostile board state.
Very true. Last point we have here under why is board control good is not specifically. I guess we've got some categories here that I kind of want to touch on as well, which is, we've got a section called how to do board control, and there's a little bullet I made which is telegraphed versus not. So things that are in your hand like Delayed Blast, Fireball, Fire Covenant, great board control cards, but they're not telegraphed, which can be an advantage, but it can also be a disadvantage, because one of the very strong effects of a board control engine, if it's telegraphed, is that it has a chilling effect on the game. And one of my favorite things to talk about, if I'm sure some listeners who have ever been in VCs with me or long conversations, I'll talk about pseudo stacks, and this is something that came up in an episode a while ago. If you haven't heard it, I suggest going back and listening to it.
Yeah.
Sorry?
They're revealed board wipes and stuff are like effective rattlesnakes.
Yes, yeah. Do you guys remember what episode the pseudo stacks thing was on? Was that like
probably the stacks episode?
No. It was grab bag or something.
It was one of the grab bags.
Gotcha.
I don't remember which one though.
Yeah, okay. So go back and listen to that if you guys want. But to give a summary, a revealed effect like a Ranger Captain comes down. In theory, everyone wants this Ranger Captain gone, but no one wants to bite the bullet because it's negative. In order to force them to crack a Ranger Captain, you have to basically take a hit, right? You're like, I'm going to cast an Ad Nauseam, and then you bait out a Ranger Captain activation, but then, you've screwed your own win attempt over. So that happens for each separate player, and then you're ending the turn with the Ranger Captain in play. Or you're ending the turn cycle with the Ranger Captain in play. On board, revealed removal, that's basically free, like it's not like some kind of one-shot thing. Even if it is one shot, it can still be an effective deterrent, but something like a Togo making a rock and having a rock equipped, that's going to be a deterrent for people to play a juicy target with 2 toughness. So that kind of chilling effect on play will actually carry you, or will give you a decent advantage beyond just the obvious ability to remove things. So that's another aspect of why board control is good that I wanted to touch on for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how do board control?
Well, okay, give me a second, because I do want to comment on not why board control is bad, but like why it might not be like worth leaning super heavily into as a strategy like a lot of the time. I think that just playing decks that can consistently interact with the board in like relatively profitable ways for your own card economy is like not a bad idea, and is certainly, it's certainly meta dependent, but it can be good in a lot of situations. I think the problem that I have is that like when people lean a bit too far into like, okay, my game plan, like every game is just going to be like wrathing the board and then like doing whatever after that, like just trying to draw cards or like piece together like some value engines or whatever after that point, is that like, so it is meta dependent, but also like even outside of that is that a lot of the time board control, and particularly like persistent board control, where like you're lining up like, or like your deck is likely to like line up multiple wraths in a row or whatever, is that board control tends to have diminishing returns in terms of like you'll wipe a big fat board with your first Pyroclasm. You'll get like 3 mana dorks, a couple of bears, a Douthy, like whatever, like somebody's commander. And then the second time you cast a Pyroclasm, you're gonna get like a dork and a commander. And the third time you cast a Pyroclasm, you're getting like somebody's commander. You're going like 1-for-1 with somebody's commander. So I just have problems with people like hard committing into board control as a primary strategy, just because like a lot of the time it's not taken into account that like the more board wiping you do, the worse each subsequent one is going to get much of the time.
Yeah, so I do agree that the diminishing turns problem is very real. Diminishing returns problem is very real. I think, yeah, that's mainly something you're going to see with the full wipes and the Pyroclasms that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Now, I disagree
or just stuff like, I mean, Toggo does it very efficiently, but like if you were playing a Jessica deck as a primary like board control deck, that ends up being like a bit sketchy because again, like it becomes you both get diminishing returns and it gets more expensive to cast each subsequent wipe.
Well, I think Jessica kind of fits. I think Jessica kind of negates the problem of diminishing returns because you're only feasibly going to be able to cast it like twice, right? So you're kind of getting it's not like you have this dead card. Like I think that and then Toggo sort of also mitigates it because you're not really investing anything into it, and it's also single target. So there's kind of like the problem in Toggo I have is honestly sometimes having not enough rocks, not that I'm have a bunch of excess rocks.
Board control-y enough for in the command zone.
No, but yeah, I think that you see that problem if you're like overloading on Pyroclasms and wipes, and you're like, man, I wish this was another card after I've resolved the second board wipe already.
Like
what I disagree with though is I think that it's not as meta dependent as you're painting it. I think because pretty sure you were saying like board control is only really good in like inbred metas. I don't think that's true.
I think like a committed board control strategy is. I think like just having I think a deck having access to a tutorable like board control element is like going to be very good basically all the time in those
which
decks.
is why we're gonna which is exactly why Bowmaster is gonna be insane.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think honestly the metas where board control of some kind isn't going to be relevant are the ones that are more inbred than the opposite.
Sure,
I think most decks are running creatures and because creatures, as we said, are very strong and there's many great creatures that you're unless you're like a polymorph deck or even if you're like super invested into like you have to be super invested into like very very fast like Storm without like I mean even decks that are running Storm are like a lot of them are built on Dockside abuse, right? They're like, I'm gonna, play a Dockside, and then I'm gonna Phantasmal Image it, then I'm gonna snap it, then I'm gonna Chain of Vapor it.
Not really. They're built on abusing a Dockside at this point. Like you cast a Dockside, you get your 7 treasures, you're out, you win the game.
That's certainly true. But let's say like to say that decks aren't running Snap and cards with the expectation that they're gonna try and copy Docksides is
not as much anymore, just because the card quality and the mana density in TurboTax is just getting like ridiculously high at this point. But yeah, I do agree. Like board control pieces are going to be good, even
you're gonna have a lot less targets, and the targets are gonna be less good. But I still think you're gonna have things to point it at.
You just have to be aware that like in those matchups, sometimes you're gonna cast a Toxic Deluge, and then somebody's gonna be like, "Great Dockside, kill you," even though I lost my entire board.
Well, I mean, the sorcery speed removal against Dockside abuse isn't even good anyway.
That's sort of what I'm getting at. And like, because most board control elements, like for the most part in the format right now, are sorcery speed. So you just have to be aware of like, oh, I'm gonna like lock down the board, and people aren't gonna be able to develop, and like they're gonna have to like spend so many turns building back up, and we're gonna get to keep picking apart at them. And
the sorcery speed doesn't even stop any of the Dockside abuse anyway. I was mostly talking about instant speed stuff.
Not even with Dockside, right? So yeah.
No, if you're playing against Rog Silas, your Pyroclasms.
Well, not even Rog Silas, right? It's just like I'm gonna Pyroclasm this Nagila player, and they're like, great, I'm super down. I'm gonna tutor. I'm gonna cast this Underworld Breach. You're gonna die because you wiped my board. Just being aware of that kind of stuff. Again, I'm not saying it happens all the time.
Pyroclasming and Nagila put them ahead.
I'm not saying no. So this this is sort of like why I was trying to explain it a bit more of like why I think that like board control dedicated strategies are a bit weaker is just because it's not that like it's bad to board wipe these decks. It's just that it's a lot of the time pretty opaque whether or not it's going to be good enough. Versus what they have going on in their hand, where like a lot of the time it will be good enough because like what they have in play was their primary strategy for that game, but a lot of the time it's just like not actually going to be good, and you're just going to die.
I just think I think maybe you're arguing against a case that I don't think people are making. Well, I'm certainly not making.
Sure.
Which is that board control is sufficient in and of itself, right? I think it's the same argument that like. If someone's got a Najeela on board and you've got a handful of nothing but interaction, sure, you might stop the breach that they've got in hand, but what you're not going to stop is them just beating you to death with Najeela and warriors, right? It's definitely it's something that needs to be paired with it's part of a more holistic strategy.
Yes.
And I don't think any dedicated, like, none of the lists, okay, like, we talked about Marath, board control. Like, the list we were talking about, like, the strongest ones are ones that are doing something in addition. So, like, the Timna Halana deck is like doing board control in addition to stacks.
Else. Yeah,
Thrasios Tago is board control in addition to
the board
counter spells. Right? Yeah. Okay, so now, moving on to how to do board control. So, Morgan, I think you wanted to... this was your section, so I'll let you take the lead on this.
Sure. Yeah. So, we've sort of talked about the various benefits of having board control and what effects might be helpful, but I think sort of talking about how those how those effects need to actually be used and what you need to be sort of looking for to maintain board control is important, because unlike in 1v1 formats where like board control is kind of just like whoever has the biggest thing, or like, generally the biggest things more or less has board control, they can attack more easily and aren't too worried about being attacked back. Obviously in CDH, trying to like answer everything your opponents play that's bigger than some of your creatures is not really practical, and killing them with combat damage isn't sort of a standard goal. So it becomes a little bit more complicated, and it matters a lot more. I mean, size does still matter. It's hard to say you have board control when your opponent has like, I don't know, giant Urza constructs. Like they have just like a pair of 12/12 constructs from an Urza saga. You probably don't have board control. But setting that aside, like a lot of what matters is actually the various effects on creatures. And so, understanding, or creatures and other permanents, understanding which of those effects you can afford to let your opponents have versus which will sort of threaten your position of control, is I think a very important sort of skill to develop if you're going to be playing a deck that's fighting for board control.
Yeah. And we touched on some of this stuff earlier. We've got the point of instant speed versus sorcery. So sorcery, the trade-off here generally is in efficiency. And not always the case, because sometimes you just have cards that are just standouts. But, like Delayed Blast Fireball versus Pyroclasm, right? It's Delayed Blast Fireball is asymmetrical, it hits faces and has extra modality, and it's an instant. The only drawback is that it's 3 mana, as opposed to Pyroclasm, which is 2. So if you're in a deck where, you'd want to be Pyroclasming on turn 2 for some reason, then, you've got that concession. And then the other sorcery speed, like, you kind of get, there's a big kind of, the disparity between Pyroclasm and Delayed Blast Fireball and Fire Covenant, not massive. Like, so you're willing to make that kind of jump to go to the instant speed there, because, as we talked about, being able to answer things at instant speed, pretty beneficial. You can stop dockside abuse, you can not telegraph your play, you can pass the turn cycle, let people develop their boards, and then wipe it all in an instant, or you can respond to someone trying to do some kind of creature combo or whatever. Now, the difference between Delayed Blast Fireball and Toxic Deluge or Supreme Verdict, if you're going to be using one of those, or Vanquish the Horde, like then you can start talking about, maybe if your commander and strategy can support it, then you kind of want to be looking at maybe I do want to get into sorceries because the ability to clear everything and clear exactly the stuff you want is sometimes a worthwhile trade-off.
Yeah.
And then the other trade-off we talked about was telegraphed versus not telegraphed, and the kind of chilling effect versus the surprise factor.
And it's also
go ahead.
The revealed and not revealed also isn't necessarily an intrinsic quality of the cards themselves. I mean, it is if you're playing a commander that does board control stuff, but also the fact that you can if you think it's required, you can always just let the table know that you think you might have to fire off a board wipe. You don't even have to reveal it or tell them. You're just ooh, this is getting a bit board's getting a bit clogged. I might have to go for a Delayed Blast Fireball here in a moment. Just to you just put the fear in them.
Yeah. One thing with the telegraph versus not, I agree that sometimes it is just beneficial to announce what you have in hand. The final point we have in under how to do board control is board control engines, and this is where I think the real telegraph versus not kind of you see the difference, which is once something is in play, and this is what I'd count as a board control engine. So Togo making rocks. In Riel playing wow, I can't remember the name.
Molten
Vortex, thank you, Morgan. Once it's in play, it's not answerable on the stack, right? So if you're maybe I need to Delayed Blast Fireball this board, there is sometimes the risk of giving people a heads up to prepare and defend their board. They're maybe I'm going to not commit to the board as much, or maybe I'm going to hold up counterspells or 2 different counterspells to ensure that this doesn't happen. So the chilling effect might not be as extreme. Whereas if it's something in play and there's really nothing they can do about it, there is a different level of chilling effect there. But again, there's trade-offs, pros and cons on each side for sure. Often I think it's best to have a healthy mix if you can. So Riel plays Molten Vortex, but also plays DBF. So, and also maybe one of the best board control cards that's purely exclusive to Riel in Firestorm. What a card!
Firestorm
is. I would not recommend including that one generically in your
most things
red board control decks.
Yeah.
If only there was there was an Infernal Tutor in the command zone.
That'd be sweet. Cool. So the last section we have here is just on board control cards and effects. So we can kind of talk a bit about each of these if we want. But yeah, it's not a crazy big topic. There's pretty easy to cover most of what's important about board control. It's kind of a simple concept to understand, I think. Bit of
an excuse to have a discussion in the later portion of this episode.
Yes. So best board control cards and effects. A lot of I think one that we have here is Grim Hireling. And Grim Hireling never gets included in a deck because of its board control aspects, but it definitely is gravy to have that, right? I know when I see an opponent resolve a Grim Hireling, I'm or put a Grim Hireling on a deck, I'm thinking damn, if it was just the mana, I think I'd be fine with that. But once it resolves, it's mana and it's gonna remove my shit.
Yeah, it's the option select for oh, I can also just I also just have infinite just removal ready to go.
Yeah. And the fact that it does have that very strong mana engine aspect means that you don't have to have that diminishing returns or overcommitting to board control, like Reed was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Turns out cards with multiple good effects on them.
The modality is very strong. Yeah,
in a lot of cases.
We've got Fire Covenant, Delayed Blast Fireball, which we've mentioned a lot of times. I think basically hands down the best instant speed board control cards.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like
I guess
on the whole,
Cycrypt,
probably like.
but I wouldn't say Cycrypt is a board control card.
Also, Fire Covenant like is just like nutty a lot of the times and fixes a lot of and can solve a lot of situations that no other piece can. It's like, okay, I'm going to kill everything except for your Oof and then your Archon. And so everybody's still locked, but I removed all the pressure from me and got to keep my entire board.
Yeah. I touched on like full wipes being like Vanquish the Horde, Supreme Verdict. Those are quite I guess Deluge is also a full wipe. But it's a lot more modal. Again, the modality there being, you can take advantage of that. The true full wipes, very hard to find places for them.
Super
I think
rare.
Mostly Shorakai is kind of what stands out to me. And then, you touched on some other stuff where you might want that, but not too many decks want that. Pyroclasms.
I think weirdly enough, like Damnation is probably like just way more playable than any of the white wipes. Just because of the types of decks that would want to play it. Like black decks tend to be just like less permanent based.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. The problem is with Damnation is that you're competing with Deluge.
Yeah.
And generally it's one of those effects. Yeah, you want access to them in the deck through tutors, especially because if you're in black, you just have that density where adding the Damnation on top of the Deluge isn't necessarily something you're interested in. I guess maybe if you're in some kind of meta where there's like giant, maybe in Bowmaster with all the giant orcs or Urzas and constructs and stuff, you consider wanting a Damnation to not have to.
Well, I mean, you just play Dam first, but
yeah, true. Well, if you can,
yeah,
yeah.
Or you play what is it? Oh god, there's so many of them. But what's there is a 4-mana one that only wipes big creatures, right? What it is anyway.
Citywide Bust or something like that.
I mean, there's Dusk or Dawn Dusk.
Isn't Dawn Dusk?
Oh yeah.
There's a few of
That's
those
5,
different.
though, right?
No, Dawn does 4.
Oh, okay.
It has Aftermath too.
Yeah.
Kind of cool. Yeah. And then the last ones on these board control cards, they're not like best or whatever. They're just kind of like standouts and unique ones that are interesting to talk about. A lot of some of them being very commander specific. So, Portal to Phyrexia, super fun one to see. Not only is it
if you could actually get it to play. Yeah.
That's the thing. So Magda is a deck that I think can run it. Although
Magda's like probably the main one.
Joyra,
Jorah, but who plays Jorah? Let's be real.
Yeah, could you imagine? Honestly,
actually,
more people should play Joyra. Joyra is very sick. And I threw on this one Portcullis. Portcullis is one that I've looked at, come across in a bunch of Magic searches, but it came up in the finals of the Bufftown Bullies with Liberator. Yeah. Although Liberator can also run an asymmetrical. So can Joyra. Asymmetrical full wipe. Trivia. What is it? Almost asymmetrical full wipe.
It's just all is dust.
No.
I mean, it is
Fraying
all
line.
is dust, but
Frayed line or whatever. Is it? I'm saying the card name right? Let me see. Hold on. Line. I think it uses like rope counters. Yeah, Fraying line.
Fraying line. Yeah.
Yeah. So when Fraying line, a 4-mana artifact, when Fraying line enters the battlefield, put a rope counter on target creature you control. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may pay 2 generic. If they do, put a rope counter on a creature they control. Otherwise, exile Fraying line and each creature without a rope counter on it. Then remove all rope counters from all creatures. So in Liberator, obviously, this is something you're only going to do in the end step right before you untap, because you put a rope counter on your thing, and you're like, I'm not going to pay, and then just exile everything except your creature. Kind of fun. Yeah.
But again, all is dust. Great.
Yeah, all it does is pretty insane in Liberator. Yeah. And then two fun ones that I wanted to touch on, which are these 1-mana permanent-based engines. So, Ulvenwald Tracker, which
is probably like way more played. It's like super. I mean, it doesn't see play in that much stuff, but like in the
no, it's not. These cards are not going to see play in a lot of stuff. They're like but the decks that they do find a home in, they're like, oh, they're quite good. I think one of the best homes for Overwhelm Tracker is Tasker.
So like yeah, but also no, because Tasker actually has like good cards that it can play, and a lot of the time when you play Overwhelm Tracker, it's because you need a creature tutorable, like repeatable removal engine, and it's just like you usually end up seeing it in stuff like green, white, and Naya and stuff, because it's like, okay, I don't have like options for like any good asymmetrical removal or stuff aside from like exactly what's it called, exactly whatever, sorry, the Overload, Winds of Abandon.
Yeah, Winds of Abandon one we should have touched on for
great
sure
one,
as well.
Fantastic one.
Yeah,
I'm a huge
great
fan
card.
Of,
great card.
I'm a huge fan of Winds of Abandon right now as your like one of out button, because
Agreed. Yeah,
a lot of the time Cycrift temporarily solves creature problems, and then people are like, great, I'll recast all my huge creatures, and it's like, well, yeah, we're back where we started, and I'm sad Cycrift my deck now, so it's gonna get a lot harder. Whereas yeah,
so I like the Overwhelm Tracker Tasker because if you are trying to play a controlling Tasker, like as we touched on, which is probably the better way to play Tasker.
Yeah.
The unfortunate aspect of Tasker's ability is that you do not get to choose what you're getting back. So if you really need some stuff gone, if you are ever in the archenemy position, or you need something removed that not everyone else, or there isn't someone else who wants that removed as well.
For the record,
it just does give you repeatable, uncounterable removal.
Yeah, for the record, you're playing control, you're going to end up in the arc enemy situation.
Yes, yeah.
Like, that's part of the reason why, unfortunately, sorry, Sinestro, Tasker doesn't see that much plays. Like, Tasker's very good at, like, getting you into the arch enemy situation, and then it's, like, very bad at actually, like, getting you to a win from that position.
And the last one of this category I want to touch on is Grim Lavamancer, which I think is a very cute tech piece in red decks that want, especially I like it in decks that are running red and white, so that if you want to tutor for something like a Ranger Captain, you can gain control over the stack to an extent and prevent people from trying to go for wins, while then also tutoring a repeatable removal engine to help gain control over the board. Obviously, there's, different cards you might want to tutor with Ranger Captain. If you're playing Tymna, maybe it's like a Wing Crafter, maybe it's a Safekeeper if you're in green, if it's a Esper Sentinel.
Safekeeper Ranger Captain is just the most toxic shit.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite pile for sure, or my favorite one drop to get for sure. Which segues us fantastically into this last minute additional category added, which is anti-board control. And
not a huge amount of those.
There's not a huge amount, but the impact that they have on the game and having access to them is massive. Safekeeper is a fantastic card.
I know exactly why you're talking about Safekeeper right now, and it has to do everything with the game that we played like 2.5 weeks ago.
Well, I mean, I also do play Safekeeper. From Get Wrong, I'm very used to this card, but yes, it is immediately on my mind because of that game. Yeah.
Where, good old Tymna versus Taga.
Yeah, turns out that Taga will just absolutely shit on Thras Tymna, picking off all of the very important, nice creatures that it runs, unless you get something like a Safekeeper, in which point you have to, like, the rocks trade-off for, having to throw, 4 or 5 rocks at a Safekeeper is just untenable. Right, like you need 4 or 5 land drops plus 8 mana
creatures, and as long as they have like some base amount of mana, especially if they find a Cradle, they're also just activating Thrasios to replace the Stone Rains, and you're just like, this sucks. Yeah.
It's exactly why cards like the Delayed Blast Fireball or non-targeting big wraths are kind of nice. Other anti-board control stuff, some decks are on, I know Natural Crunch, who's a friend of the show, runs a Joda deck, the Cascade Joda, which you get to run some fun stuff like Kira Glass Spinner, if you want, or I guess Rafine, or Tivit is a good example, Ward can be very annoying.
Ward is a huge spoiler alert. We're probably going to talk a bit about meta composition when we talk about Bowmaster later in the episode, but spoiler alert, Tibbet's a large part of that equation.
Yeah. And there's some, a modality on Veil of Summer or Autumn's Veil is definitely like a nice little, protect your shit from like a Fire Covenant or something like that.
Definitely. There's also, there's the new white one too, right? I forget what it is. 1 mana, your stuff gets hexproof.
Yeah.
But I forget what it's called. Morgan?
Same.
You have it?
Wait, sorry, which card?
1 mana white instant.
It's new. It's
hexproof.
You and permanents you control get hexproof, I think. Or you and creatures you control get hexproof, something like that. Anyway, very good. I gotta look it up. Keep podcasting. I'll come back around for revelation.
And then other things people run like Mom, like in Winota or Skrell, and all these kinds of effects definitely to just protect creatures, because one of the most important things, you're talking about Timna Halana.
Surge of Salvation. You and permanents you control get hexproof, and then you prevent all damage that black and red sources will deal to creatures you control this turn, which is also very nice.
Yeah, as we were talking about with that board control isn't a strategy that's viable in and of itself. It's something that needs to be paired with something that's also going to impact the stack or whatever. So either you're doing that through counter spells if you're playing blue like Thrastago, or you're doing that through stacks in something like Timna Halana. You need something to also protect your own stuff from your opponent. So, be that Safekeeper to protect your stacks effects, or your counter spells to prevent your opponents resolving massive, Fire Covenants, DBFs, and all that stuff. Okay. I think that wraps up the main topic. Any closing remarks from either of you guys?
Yeah, I think we got some pretty good coverage.
Cool. Which means we can move on to listener questions, because we have 2 listener questions today. Gut Check is getting moved to the second listener question because it's going to be directly related to that. The first listener question comes to us from Splocketeer, who asks, what was the most complicated / memorable ruling a judge has had to make in the tournaments you all have played in?
Got some good ones. Mine probably isn't that great. It's just when we had, it's still a good story, but it's not like an insane judge call. We just a tournament call where it was like a half-hour judge call with an escalation to the head judge, and got to the point where basically the stack was so irrevocably just completely fucked and just not at all recoverable, where got to the point where the head judge is just like, okay, this stack in front of us is a legal stack, correct? Great, resolve it. I'm not doing any more fixing.
Nice. Morgan?
I guess I have 2. The funniest or most memorable one was actually a standard tournament I was at, where someone cast a confiscation coup on their opponent's Chandra, Torch of Defiance, which is
Hold on, I'm gonna read
not
out
legal because
I'm gonna read out confiscation coup for listeners, for the benefit of our listeners. 3 in double blue sorcery, choose target artifact or creature. You get 4 energy, then you may pay an amount of energy equal to that permanent's converted mana cost. If you do, gain control of it.
Yeah, so the key things here is that Chandra, Torch of Defiance is actually a planeswalker and not an artifact or a creature.
Turns out.
But it is a permanent. And so what happened is they cast it, their opponent responded with a counterspell. They were like, oh, I'll negate that. And then they played a dispel or they countered the negate. And then they realized, and they called the judge, and the ruling was that since they had cast a negate targeting the confiscation coup, then the confiscation coup was on the stack, because it needed to be in order to be a legal target. So it was on the stack with an illegal target, but because it's worded as gain control of that permanent, when it resolved, the person was able to pay the energy and gain control of the planeswalker.
Wild.
But if you wanted something specifically CDH related, then at the LCQ at Tier 1 Con last summer, um, one of my opponents he was playing Gitrog, cast a Tainted Pact and exiled two of the important cards for the cleanup sculpt. I don't remember which ones they were. It was Crop Rotation and something else. Maybe it was their way of winning with only black mana. And then started cleanup step sculpting, and just it. The judge didn't really want him doing anything, but just
just
it was like
watching
a
and
half-hour
shaking his head,
turn
yeah.
of a person that like was trying to reach a game state that they were literally never going to reach. And all of this was like the most garbage time because Aristic Study, between the Gitrog player and the person before them, Aristic Study had been fed like 12 cards or something for the Rogsai player. And it was like, it was going to pass to me. I think I had almost nothing in play because they had bounced. Someone had swatted to protect something and directed it at my Priest of Titania, which was like my only real source of like any meaningful amount of mana, because that was basically the only target. And so I untapped with 3 mana, looked at the Rogside player with like 12 cards in hand, and I was like, "What? I don't know what you guys want me to do about this." And so I fimmaged to Dockside, overloaded Rift, passed to Rogside, and died. And it was like,
Yep.
this game could have been wrapped up like half an hour ago if we hadn't felt the need to sculpt for a hand that we were literally never going to find.
Damn. Yeah, I also have 2 for mine, and longtime listeners will. I mean, that's not even a long time. It was like a year ago. Listeners will know I mentioned this after Punt City last year, where I got a game loss issued due to running snow basics in my list instead of the regular basics that I had put, or it was either, I forget if it was vice versa. But anyway,
you had snow basics in your online list.
Yeah, snow basics. Oh yeah, no, that's right. In my online list, and the reason I put snow basics in my online list is because when it's sorted alphabetically, it will put your basic lands next to each other because they're all like snow covered blank, which is just a small, nice quality of life thing in when you're brewing. And then I had regular basics in my list, and I get pulled aside to do random deck check. I was like, okay, yeah, fine, here's my deck. They come back, and they're kind of like, there's a couple of them walking back. I was like, oh no, they're looking at me. What's going on? Like, are you the Riel player? Yeah, okay. And then he asked me a question. It's like, would you've got a deck error? You've got snow covered in your online list and regular basics in your list. Which did you intend to do? Like, did you intend to bring your online list with the snow-covered basics, or did you intend to have your online list with regular basics? And I'm like, I guess I intended to bring the list that I have in paper, and I explained the reason why I use the snow basics, and they're like, damn. Yeah, we have to issue a game loss. Because I guess if I had answered the question the other way,
the Sphinx's riddle.
Yeah, they wouldn't have gotten a game loss.
Yeah. The reasoning behind that is that, like, if someone registers the list they intends to play and then just, like, messes up putting it together, that's considered, like, not an accident. Or, that's considered, like, it's very easy for that to be an accident, right? Like, just, like, one of the cards got misplaced, or, like, I accidentally kept in an old card, whatever. But if you misregister a list, then, like, your registration is, like, intentional, right? So if you register a list that's something other than what you intended to play, then they consider that to be, like, a much more intentional error. And that's why. Obviously, like, it wasn't in this case.
Yeah.
But these rules were not written with, like, Moxfield UI in mind.
Yeah. I could tell the judge was definitely, like, sympathetic. He's like, damn, like, okay, I'm sorry I have to do this. I'm like, no worries, no hard feelings. I get it. And then I've got another one, which is, I think, kind of interesting, which was in the past, in the last tournament of Chaos, I think last Treasure Series, I was playing Magar, and I mean, Magar is an entire another can of worms in terms of rulings. Before the tournament, I think I went to the judge Discord on 3 separate days. Like every day I'd ask a question, and the next day I'd be like, okay, well now I need to ask another question, a follow-up question. Very weird rulesy deck, just because of how it works. I mean, unsurprising from an uncard. But the judge, so in game 1, I was on stream, and Morgan was actually commentating it. And it was quite an interesting game. So if anyone wants to go back and watch it, it was really cool. But in the game, it was relevant that I basically committed strategic suicide to make it harder for my one opponent to win. I think it was a dockside or something. Morgan, do you remember? Was it a dockside?
Yeah. They were trying to go off with Breach, and they somehow didn't have Petal, and so they needed the mana to like brain freeze themselves out or whatever it was they were doing, and you had like 4 of the 6 artifacts and enchantments, and you were at 1.
I was at 1, and I had I don't know if I had like a Necropotence or a City of Brass, something like that. Yeah, and so it was the City of Brass, and then I was like, okay, I'll kill myself, and that was good. There was no judge call there, but in the same tournament, a later game, same situation comes up where there's a dockside player going off, and I'm like, I actually did this a bit too late. I should have done it earlier in the turn. But when I did remember, I was like, oh shit, yeah, okay, I can, this came up earlier. I'll do this again. Someone called that I tried to tap an Ancient Tomb, or I tried to activate I was paying a bunch of life into Necropotence. And someone was like, can you do that? I was like, yeah. And so they call the judge, and the judge is like, yeah, you are allowed to kill yourself in the game. That's acceptable. But yeah, so I guess small lesson to our listeners. It's not a spike play or something. If you're in a tournament,
it's never too late to kill yourself.
No. Is that don't think of all of your outs and stuff, because draws are relevant. Draws are relevant.
Demonetized on YouTube.
Oh god.
No. In game.
In
Minecraft, of course.
Yeah, in my
on spell table. Yeah, that game was wild. It was also hilarious because at a certain point, each of the 3 players remaining in the game controlled a Razaketh the Foul-Blooded, and that game went to a draw.
Yeah, insane.
I guess there's also another good judge call from that same tournament that I saw as commentating was the Kinnan player who put out an opponent had a Damping Sphere, and then they put out a Nyxbloom Ancient, and that actually made their lands tap for like they were gated on colored mana. They had a Basalt Monolith, and they had infinite colorless mana, and then they started spinning Kinnan and put out a Nyxbloom Ancient, not realizing that would actually give them less colored mana because the lands would tap for 3, and then the Damping Sphere would override that and make them tap for colorless.
Oh my god, that's so brutal. Yeah. Cool, and then that brings us to our next and final listener question, which comes to us from Offensive Wombat, who asks, what's the over-under time frame for Orcish Bowmasters being banned? And yeah, we talked about it a few times in this episode already. And people, our listeners who are on our Discord server, which if you aren't, you definitely should. It's not like it's crazy active. You're not going to have to, be scrolling through a bunch of stuff. But when we do have discussions there, they tend to be really good. And
I'd like to think that we actually have a very reasonable community on the Discord at this point, and we tend to have pretty good discussions when they do pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is because we're all parts of like other really active Discord servers, and we know that if someone's like, oh, join this Discord server, it's also like super. It can be a lot, right? And you're like, I can't add this. It's only gonna be every now and then, and when there is discussion, it's quite good. So yeah, we were talking about Orcish Bowmasters. It was spoiled, and we were making some predictions on it, and then we played a couple games. Where it wasn't even everyone who could be running Orcish Bowmasters was running it. I think it was just Reed.
Or I think there were 2 at the table.
I think there was.
For a bunch of them.
There was a blue front player who wasn't playing it at all, right? And then it was me on Magar who wasn't playing it because I was doing the the Divergent thing,
I
and then
I remember that there were a couple of games where like multiple of them popped up, but yeah,
there was later in the we played like 7 games total that day.
There weren't that many Bowmasters at the table, but they were still just like incredibly over centralizing every time, like every
and I saw Reed. I think so. One thing people were talking about was like, oh, I mean, it's going to be impactful, but how often are you going to tutor for it, or like maybe I'm going to use creature tutors on it. I swear to God, Reed, I think you used like Vamp and like D-tutor. You like after the first game where you're like, oh my God, this card is warping.
Well, the first game I ever played it, the first game I cast it, which is the first game that I played with it in the deck, there was one person with a Rustic Study, and I had a 17-17 within a turn cycle.
Yeah.
And everybody had lost their entire boards, and I was just like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing to consider with it is that it just, not only does it make, like, if you guys haven't played with, like, Urza or against constructs that become massive, like, combat, that kind of combat is very relevant.
Like Ishai, or just, like, stuff that becomes
but the thing, what I was going to say with constructs, at least, is, like, constructs, they force you to block and chump, right?
Yeah.
Well, dude, Orcish Bowmaster does, it kills all of the chump blockers.
Yep.
And it makes bigger things in a construct. And then if it goes away, it just makes another one. Like, truly, truly warping. And also, one of the worst kind of play patterns, I've talked about this, I don't know if we talked about this on the show before. I actually think we have, way back with the ban list episode, where I said one of my least favorite aspects of Leovold, in like no ban list or whatever, is that Leovold is like the best answer to Leovold. Right? If someone's going to be playing Leovold wheels, you're like, man, I should just be playing Leovold, so then they don't get the Leovold benefit. And that's such a toxic pattern that arises from like game design. And they fixed it with certain things, like with Glorybringer. Glorybringer's a 4/4 that flying and exerts and deals 4 damage to non-dragons, right? Because otherwise, Glorybringer hitting Glorybringers is just toxic. Well, Orcish Bowmaster doesn't have any restrictions. It just says any target. It's on ETB.
It could have said non-orc. Oh my God. It would have been so easy.
Yeah, so the fact that the best answer to a Bowmaster from an opponent is to get your own Bowmaster, or to copy their Bowmaster with a Fimage and then kill their Bowmaster, is just so gross.
Yeah.
And toxic and awful. And yes, I play with it. I'm glad that I actually called it, I think, on the either it was on one of our private servers or on the ITN server. I said something like, this card, I haven't even played with this card yet, and I'm already sick of it, and then like this card needs to get banned. And I mean, we talk about cards that, you know, we wish would get banned, like I want Draneth banned, but it's not a card that I think needs to get banned. It's a card I want banned. We all have cards like that. I think Orcish Bowmasters is, I mean, maybe it's preemptive, and I mean, okay, it's certainly premature, but I think just the games I've seen and just looking at the card and my experience in CDH, I think this card will have to be banned, or I certainly hope so, because it's
not getting banned. There's no shot.
That's the thing. Is that like I really wish it would be, and it's not even because it's like a power. I'm not saying Bowmaster is a better card than Dockside or Thoracle or Breach or like etc. I like, maybe it cracks top 5 like best cards. No, probably not even then. Like in terms of like most powerful cards in the format. Like maybe it cracks top 5 most powerful non-signpost cards in the format. Or like non-pillar cards in the format. Yeah. But like, the reason we want it banned isn't because of its power level. It's because the play patterns are just incredibly toxic, and it basically and it's like single-handedly warps the meta around just like playing just even more non-interactive decks. Or I guess even less interactive decks on the whole. Because
it de facto bans a bunch of creatures. Like Notion Thief is unplayable.
You just can't really play Oof anymore. Like Oof isn't really a viable strategy.
I think because you're
gonna cast Oof, and then like somebody's gonna have a Tim the Trigger on the stack, and like whoever needs the Oof god is just gonna be like, great, it responds Flash and Bowmaster, ping once, Tim the Trigger resolves, ping it the second time. I have a 2/2 now. Like
there's certainly that, but I think those are still like two toughness is still like somewhat playable at least, but like there's a lot of like interesting 1 toughness cards that we were, you know, talking about, like Notion Thief is one, Fairy Mastermind. You know, we were kind of excited about Mastermind. It's like, oh, this is cool, it's good in Timna decks, it kind of has, you know, let's figure this card out. That card's unplayable. A lot of the cards we were talking about earlier, Ultimate Tracker, Grim Lavamancer, I mean, at least they have the possibility to kill the Bowmaster, and trade. But like they're just it's disgusting. It is so disgusting. And some of the people who've also played with it in our server have like reported back after a few games like, yes, I agree. Bowmasters is awful. I think it's I have hope that it would get banned because I think it has it's good and potentially relevant in casual. Like Hull Breacher, I think the whole thing of like, if someone plays Hull Breacher wheels, strips everyone's hand and makes a bunch of treasures, that was happening in casual. But I think it's going to be like someone slams Bowmaster, plays a wheel, asymmetrically wipes everyone's boards and makes a 21-21, right? Like that's maybe of a power level that might consider it getting banned. And if everyone's running it, and it has that same kind of play pattern that they banned Primetime for, and they won't let Primetime come off because they're like, well, when Primetime was in play or in the game, everything became about Primetime, about flickering Primetime or copying Primetime. Everyone was playing clones to clone other people's Primetimes. I think it could have a similar effect with Bowmaster.
The problem is that like is that wiping the board and making it 21-21 is actually a far less toxic play pattern than mind twisting everyone, because like, first of all, your opponents actually do have a chance to come back. Like if they just play a regular board wipe, then you're at sort of parity-ish.
Yeah.
But also like they're left with 7 cards in hand, right? As opposed to 0. And so even if they do wind up losing to the giant creature, they don't just like not play the game because they don't have any cards. And so in terms of like how unfun it is, and particularly how much time is spent not having fun, it's like way less egregious than Hull Breacher, and that's why I think it's just never getting banned.
I hope I don't want to make adopt like a defeatist mentality already. I think maybe because CDH, like when the time, like we used we banded together as a community to get flash banned, and we used a lot of our like, we're like this.
I mean, we used our one time. That
we,
was
we,
our
we,
one
but,
time.
But the thing is, I don't know if we're not. It's not like the community as a whole is banding together to ask for cards to get banned constantly. Like that was when we had overwhelming community sentiment, and that was what year was that? Like 2018. Was it 2020?
It took like 4 years to get flash banned. Yeah, after the Hull Gun ban.
I mean,
that wasn't was that 2020?
It was 2020.
It was during COVID, yeah, or like right before.
Time is meaningless.
Time is meaningless. Holy shit! Yeah.
So I will say I do think it's like it's not the same, because I think like there is much more of an acknowledgement of, like, rather than us being our own little separate community, that there's a pretty broad spectrum that includes us on it.
Yeah.
So
we have CDH players on the RC now, and in the CAG. Not just, I mean, we had CDH members in the CAG before, but CDH players now actually in the RC. That's something.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think that we're never gonna see a ban, like, at least in large part motivated by CEDH. Like, I think saying, we used our one is probably oversimplifying, even if that was the sentiment at the time. But like, I just don't think this is gonna be it.
Oh, God, I hope so. I want to start the discourse and banning it, and I think the more, I mean, I think maybe people are like, well, it's premature, and even in the regular, like, Hull Breacher, and it takes a while for things to get banned, so we're gonna have to live with this for a while.
I mean, Hull Breacher was what, like
6 months,
7-ish months,
yeah, something like that. So I think it's gonna, I mean, the people who are playing with it and kind of understand, like, they're looking into the future and how it's affecting the games now. They're like, oh my God, I see how this is going to affect, the game when everyone's playing this card, and how the meta is going to, like, evolve around this, and it's just super toxic. But that is kind of like, looking into the future. Whereas I think it's going to be a lot more of a compelling case when people get their hands on this card and they start playing games, and they don't even need to use that level of analysis of looking into the future. They can just look at the games they're playing and how it's affecting them on their day-to-day, and just be like, man, this card is miserable. Absolutely miserable. And I think when more people start experiencing that, then maybe we can start having a real discussion about it, because TDH has grown a lot as a format since then. We make up a much larger percentage of the overall Commander player base. We have more representation in the RC and CAG. We have SCG doing CDH events now, like more kind of mainstream recognition, more tournaments and gatherings, and just hopefully that's enough to at least get consideration of the health of our format getting, like, I don't think it's a competitive balance thing. It's again using the same sort of argument as casual, which is it's just not fun. It's really not fun.
Yeah, I think it runs into the, like, there's a sense in which, like, a card that said your opponents lose the game is less unfun than a card that says your opponents discard their hands, right?
Yeah.
And like, this is leaning very much towards the former, not the latter.
Maybe. I don't want to have to think about this card staying in the CDH meta for years and years.
And yet you're gonna have to, because it's at least gonna be half a year.
I mean,
that's not
I'm
true.
strapped in for the half a year or a year
for years. He doesn't have to think about that.
Yeah, true. You just leave.
Yeah, well,
or not think.
I encourage our listeners to play with this card and, get some experience. And if you think it's also unfun, voice your concerns to the people who represent our community on the CAG and RC.
If you think it's not that good, I mean, feel free to let us know.
I would love to talk to someone who thinks this card is.
Seriously, I would love to hear from people who have played with the card and think it's not good. I wanna know those opinions and have that perspective. Because I'm tainted because I thought it was busted when it was spoiled, and every game that I've played with it so far, it's been
only confirmed it. Yeah.
So yeah.
So I guess to answer the question from Offensive Wombat, what's the over/under time frame? You guys are both never.
Yeah, I'm
never.
I'm leaning to never. I can see the argument of, like, it might, like, it has some reasons that it could get banned from like casual support as well, but I don't think it's gonna get banned.
I'm gonna give it. I think if it's gonna get banned, I think it's gonna be banned around. I think if it lasts over a year, it's not getting banned. So I'm gonna say under a year. So probably it's gonna be over the 6 months, 7 months, or whatever of Hull Breacher. But I think if it lasts a year, it's not getting banned. So I'm gonna say under a year. And then to finish it out with the gut check related to this. I mean, I wanted to.
I was definitely down to have a bit of a discussion around. I don't know. Maybe we can do this for another episode, but have a bit of a discussion around what we think about the meta going forward with Orcish Bowmasters / like recommendations for decks to try out if you want to.
Oh sure, I think we touched on some of it.
Feels like a lot to cram in at the 90-minute mark.
I think that some quick tips are going to be run your own Bowmasters, run Gilded Drake, run Phantasmal Image, run the hottest tech is. I think Fimage is fine because if Fimage is a Bowmaster, it kills the other Bowmaster, and then if it was going to die to anything targeting it anyway, it's going to be dead to Bowmaster would have died to that anyway. Bowmaster isn't exactly resilient itself.
I would say maybe not. I wouldn't necessarily say that people would have to go into like Bowmaster abuse and copying that much. I would say my recommendation would be to look for decks that are relatively immune or are like less impacted from having their like board pinged a bunch. So like this is stuff like I think the big ones now
Tibet,
are like Tibet, Atraxa is a big one. If you were already playing Kenrith, potentially looking at builds of Kenrith like fewer dorks and maybe like leaning on Kenrith like faster mana, like artifact mana a bit more. Looking at like value engines that aren't like X1s or X2s, or potentially just like non-creature value engines overall for your decks and stuff like that.
if you want to, we were talking about board control this episode. Thrasios Tago is a deck that I think is, you're running dorks, so you are hurt by the Bowmaster ping, but the ability to kill the Bowmaster, so even if there are draw triggers on the stack, they are going to get that ETB guaranteed, but if you can just kill it in response to whatever draw triggers they're trying to Bowmaster in response to, like, you do mitigate that quite a bit. So, if you wanted to play a board control deck, you could play Thrasios Tago, or some of the things I was saying, like just more instant speed, single turret removal. I was a fan of the Fimages because I think having your own Bowmaster is kind of insane. One of the hottest pieces of tech for copying Bowmasters or whatever is going to be... and I don't think this goes into like every deck or anything, but if you can support this, I think the Imposter mech is pretty funny because it obviously is itself immune from Bowmaster.
Yeah, because it makes a Bowmaster immune Bowmaster.
Yeah, which is that's just so fucking cursed, man. Yeah, more single tire removal. Play decks that are immune to it, or and play copy cards. I think those get a bit better to punish the other Bowmasters. Yeah, but we could do a more in-depth adjusting to Bowmaster thing later. Probably when the meta people have had time to get sick of it already, and
we'll do it in a couple of episodes. Episode or two.
Yeah. So yeah, my gut check, everyone's favorite segment, gut check. Woohoo, yee.
Gut check.
Was just going to be if you had to pick one card. Okay. Actually, I guess I'll rephrase like this: is there a card? You get one ban. Is there a card you'd ban before Bowmasters?
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, what are they?
Dockside.
I feel like it's actually a relatively long list.
So are you banning? Are you banning for power level, Morgan? Because I think there's lots of cards. I won't disagree that I think there's lots of cards,
of power levels and play patterns.
Okay.
Certainly I would ban Thoracle or Dockside above it, for like a combination of like power level plus sort of diversity reasons. I think you could make an argument for Breach. I think you could also make an argument that the play patterns, particularly of early Rhystic Studies and Mystic Remoras, are as much, if not even more, unfun. So yeah, it would be relatively far down my list of bans.
Interesting. Okay,
when I say relatively, it's probably top 10, but
wow, that's really
I'm
far
not sure
down.
if it cracks top 5.
I don't think I'd ban. I've been on the show before saying that I hate Draenith. I think Draenith is a kind of antithetical to the spirit of the format. And I'd want Thoracle banned for just power level reasons and meta diversity or whatever. I think Dockside could go, and I'd be fine with Dockside going. I don't find it that. I don't mind Dockside in the format. And I don't think Breach needs to go. I think Breach is just so vulnerable to lots of different things that I think Breach is totally fine. But
I think I've said this before. No, my issue with Breach is that when Thoracle exists, it's not worth it to hate it.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. I just think that the effect that Bowmasters has on making a bunch of cards unplayable. I don't think the Rhystics, the Docksides, the Thoracles really do that. And I think a lot of the cards that it's gonna make unplayable are what cards that make the format interesting. And I just think from a fun factor and how warping it's gonna be on deck decision and deck construction, there's not a card I'd ban before.
I guess
Bowmasters.
I think saying it makes things unplayable is just kind of overstating the case pretty severely.
You don't think
like even
Notion Thief is unplayable?
Even when I think Notion Thief might be unplayable, but I don't think making Notion Thief it goes from being fringe playable to unplayable.
Yeah.
Like
Magda's unplayable.
Sorry?
Magda's unplayable.
Magda was already unplayable.
That's not true though. That's not true. That's for sure not true.
It's It wasn't exactly well positioned.
No, it's not. But well positioned versus unplayable is like completely different. And
sure, so like cards that were already on the fringes that were especially reliant on 1 toughness are sure they take a hit. Like that's not. I don't think that's like. That doesn't mean that it's making like a lot of stuff unplayable single-handedly, like, and I think like even things that actually line up, like, you know, here's an example of a card that we didn't say is unplayable, right? Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel, like, literally is a mandatory draw on a 1 toughness creature, so it just dies, like, instantly for free every time. You can't stop it, but like. Saying Esper Sentinel's unplayable is like an absurd.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's unplayable. I just think it's because Esper Sentinel, the investment for Esper Sentinel is like next to nothing, and in order for it to die, you are getting a card out of it, right?
But like, so okay, there was.
I guess you're not necessarily because you can just kill it on.
There was a time when every pod had several board wipes of some like Pyroclasm, whatever. In it, like that was very expected. That didn't make Tymna and Dorks unplayable.
No, but they're also creature types that are they're also card types that are much more counterable and interactable than Bowmaster. Like we talked about Abolisher, countering Abolisher is hard because it's a creature. Like I listed the things that counter Abolisher. It's not many. Like you are gonna get that Bowmaster.
But Abolisher doesn't make Force of Negation unplayable, right? Like
no, I don't see the comparison.
Well, just like it's a counter spell that only works on your opponent's turn. It's only good, really, at stopping your opponents from winning, and everyone can just find an Abolisher, and then why are you even running Force of Negation? LOL. Right? Like obviously that's not a reasonable reaction to the existence of Grand Abolisher. So even a card that is completely hosed by this effect doesn't just become unplayable because the effect exists.
No, but I don't think that's, like, I think there's a lot more that goes into making a card unplayable than just having a single card that makes it, that it hoses it, right? Like there's lots of things that hose other things in CDH, right? I think the fact that if you're having to invest, if you're having to invest for like, you know, like I think Fairy Mastermind basically becomes unplayable. I think Notion Thief becomes unplayable. Magda becomes unplayable. I think Dorks get a lot worse. I didn't go through the full list of like CDH creatures that would have 1 toughness, but I don't think everything with 1 toughness, like to your point, becomes completely unplayable. But I do think.
Wait, I figured out a card that it actually does make unplayable.
Yeah.
What?
Arcane Denial.
Nice.
No, Arcane Denial counters Bowmasters, you fool.
No, but someone's going to flash it in response to your Arcane Denial triggers.
Actually, the draw 2 is a May. The only mandatory draw is the
Do you think your opponents aren't going to draw 2?
No, I mean, what actually the real answer is like Brainstorm, you know? Which I've long thought that, and I've said that many times. I really do not like Brainstorm. I like that you're also saying that now as well. But I think that this confirms it dead, you know, which is great. I think people need that card. That card needs to go. I think it makes one interesting thing is I think it makes wheels more questionable for people.
Which,
very risky.
Wheels were already becoming questionable.
Exactly, which is sort of I sort of like that aspect of it, which is like pushing people away from the wheels that I think were kind of already bad. But yeah,
people are just gonna play wheels because they want to combo them with their Bowmaster.
I'm ending it all, man. Holy shit!
All right, we're ending it all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. If you guys were to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at Into the North Pod, via our email, intonorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. Again, this conversation about Bowmaster and all this stuff carries on the Discord or on Twitter or whatever, so yeah, definitely reach out to us and join. Extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a patron, we are at patreon.com/InkNorthPodcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, and to Nate Slubber for our equally lovely podcast logo. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya. Bye.
Have a good one.